Sitting in tonight, Sam Donaldson.
Good evening. Attorney General Edwin Meese came under heavy pressure today to resign his post in the wake of yesterday's resignations from the Justice Department of two of his top aides, an action intended as a vote of no confidence in him. But in the face of new bipartisan calls for him to step down, and with the public backing of the president, Meese is vowing to stay on. Details of the story from Dennis Trout.
If Ed Meese is troubled, he did a good job of hiding it today as he spoke to reporters outside the Justice Department.
The Department of Justice has been operating as usual.
Meese was on the counterattack, insisting that positions opened by yesterday's resignations will be filled shortly, even claiming he's persuaded his third-ranking man, Solicitor General Charles Freed, reportedly considering resignation, not to quit.
I have no doubt that Mr. Freed will remain a strong member of the management team.
But against this apparent confidence, calls for Meese to step down were reaching a new pitch. From Capitol Hill, Senate Majority Leader Robert Byrd called Meese the crown jewel of the SLEAZE factor in the Reagan administration, a sentiment echoed by other Democrats.
It seems to me that it would be in the best interest of the justice system and for the president and for the American public if Mr. Meese would step aside.
Even Republican Senator Robert Packwood said, quote, "You owe it to the president to remove yourself." But Meese had his defenders.
I think he's being held to account because of some of his political viewpoints when he was at the White House. And that's not quite fair.
Meanwhile, the investigation of Meese by independent counsel James McKay took a new turn as well. McKay subpoenaed the work records of Meese's wife Ursula for the job she's held since 1981, including one with the Multiple Sclerosis Society. McKay is trying to learn whether lawyer E. Robert Wallach tried to repay favors from the Attorney General by getting employment for Mrs. Meese. While Meese insists the McKay investigation will clear him and he'll retain his job, with top-level resignations only a day old, the Justice Department is hardly, as Meese says, back to business as usual. Dennis Trout, ABC News, the Justice Department.
No matter who comes out against Meese, there is one opinion that matters more than any other at this stage, the opinion of the president, Meese's boss and longtime friend. And as Sheila Cast reports, the president apparently isn't wavering in his support.
President Reagan answered calls for Meese's resignation with a show of support.
I have every confidence in him. He's been a friend for 20 years, and I'm not going to comment any further on what is going on there.
Even White House staff members who believe the Attorney General has become a liability are not making that argument to the president because he's made it clear he doesn't want to hear talk of his longtime friend leaving. That group is said to include Chief of Staff Howard Baker. First Lady Nancy Reagan also believes Meese should step down. But in contrast to her intense groundwork for the departure of former Chief of Staff Donald Reagan, this time Mrs. Reagan's role is low-key. Campaigning in Wisconsin, Vice President Bush made every effort not to be drawn into a defense of Meese.
Appearance of impropriety should not be equated with impropriety itself. I think there's a certain sense of fair play that the American people have. But having said that, the Justice Department does have to be above reproach.
The word here is that the president is set in concrete on this issue. The only possibility of change would come if Meese is indicted or in the unlikely event he offers to go. Sheila Cast, ABC News, the White House.
Reverend Jesse Jackson conferred with some top mainstream Democratic Party leaders today in Washington in an extraordinary effort by each side to get to know each other in the light of Jackson's surging presidential candidacy. To be sure, in yesterday's Connecticut primary, Massachusetts Governor Michael Dukakis beat Jackson handily, recovering some of his front-runner status, so badly tarnished by Jackson's weekend Michigan victory. Our latest ABC News delegate count shows Dukakis now has 683 delegates, Jackson 650, Senator Albert Gore 380. But Britt Hume reports that the Connecticut results did little to reduce the desire of party leaders to get to know Jackson and figure out what to do about him.
Here was a scene unimaginable only weeks ago. Jesse Jackson arriving for breakfast in Washington at the invitation of the party establishment. Seated on his left, the venerable Clark Clifford, advisor to presidents going back to Truman, defense secretary under Johnson, a man synonymous with Washington power and success. At a tumultuous news conference afterward, Clifford and others were careful to disguise any private fright they might feel at the prospect of a Jackson nomination with praise for his campaign.
What he is doing is bringing a message to the people that has not been brought to them before.
This campaign is for all Americans. It's not just for white Irish white males like me, or Jewish people, or black people, or anything. This is an American campaign, and that's one of the reasons that I enjoy the Reverend.
For his part, the Reverend said he enjoyed meeting all these big shots, too.
Today's meeting gives us the dimension of strengthening the infrastructure of our campaign of the Democratic Party.
When Jackson left later, it was not to attend the meeting he had requested with his rival Albert Gore. Gore criticized Jackson yesterday, and Jackson called off the meeting. Jesse Jackson has never cared for criticism. The success of his campaign may bring him more of it, but not apparently from the party elders. Their plan seems to be to do nothing that might appear an effort to stop him, while at the same time hoping that someone, presumably Michael Dukakis, will. Britt Hume, ABC News, Washington.
The next test comes next Tuesday in Wisconsin, where the polls show Jackson and Dukakis running neck and neck, and where, curiously, for Dukakis perhaps damagingly, state law allows Republican voters to help determine the Democratic winner. A report on how this may work next Tuesday from Chris Bury.
From Wisconsin's frosted dairy farms to its steaming factory towns, there is a hint of political mischief in the air. Wisconsin's Republican governor, who backs George Bush, can't find enough nice things to say about Democrat Jesse Jackson.
Of all the Democrat candidates, I think Jesse Jackson has shown himself to be a fine leader.
Why is a Republican being so generous to Jesse?
Well, just send a very clear signal to Republicans throughout the state to get over into our primary, vote for Jesse Jackson, and stop Mike Dukakis from winning Wisconsin.
The Dukakis people worry that Republicans, now assured of George Bush, will take advantage of Wisconsin's open primary and create disarray for Democrats. But today, the governor denied he was up to anything so sly.
I try to say something nice about everybody. I have no political purpose whatsoever.
Polls here show Dukakis neck and neck with Jackson in a state where blacks make up only 4% of the voters. But Jackson's tireless backing of union causes is paying off with white support, like the endorsement of auto workers in Kenosha.
He inspired the membership, and he stood with us, and we're going to stand with him.
Al Gore is spending big money here, Paul Simon lots of time. But party pros say Wisconsin is really round one of the Dukakis-Jackson championship fight, a fight that could hinge on how many Republicans turn up in Jackson's corner. Chris Bury, ABC News, Milwaukee.
When we come back, Land Day in the occupied territories, and 4 more Palestinians are killed. And later in this broadcast, the Reverend Jimmy Swaggart heading back to the pulpit, and students learning about death not at home, but in the schools.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings, brought to you by IBM.